Elon. No matter how you feel about him, love him or hate him, his contributions to the space industry are unquestionably revolutionary. But occasionally, we all wonder if his ideas are truly innovative or simply not so good. Give us a chance to clarify before the Elon fanboys whip out their pitchforks. Our sky shouldn't be crowded with tens of thousands of tiny satellites. Musk does not have the authority to select how many satellites should be launched just because he has innovative ideas for batteries and reusable rockets. They will obstruct the light from planets, moons, and stars, and our systems for monitoring asteroids that pose a threat to our existence may be in jeopardy as a result. And in case you're wondering what we're talking about, we're referring to the so-called revolutionary Starlink, which aims to provide accessible internet to everyone in the world. And why did we say so-called revolutionary? Some scientists fear that Elon Musk's Starlink satellite may bring about the horrific Kessler syndrome, which would end all space travel. Everyone is aware of how large space is. However, rather illogically, it's also packed. In low Earth orbit, a serious issue is developing that links advanced engineering to a second space race. But as if worrying about Kessler syndrome wasn't bad enough, we now sort of have to worry about China because, according to Chinese scientists, Elon Musk's Starlink poses a military danger. But more on that later. Some scientists believe that too many satellites in orbit might imprison humans on Earth, so what some view as a spectacular sky display is actually a major source of worry for others. So what exactly is Kessler syndrome then? Not to scare you, but the Kessler syndrome may have already started. We frequently have a tendency to overlook the drawbacks of technology as we advance, and today we will discuss one such issue. Since the beginning of the space era, there's been an issue with space debris. Donald J. Kessler, a NASA scientist, developed the idea for the Kessler syndrome. Basically, the Kessler syndrome is a phenomenon where the density of objects in low Earth orbit increases to the point that a collision between two objects might set off a huge cascade. The impacts could increase the possibility of further encounters, producing additional space debris. As a result, there are even more issues with debris, which has a detrimental effect on satellites, astronauts, and mission planners. To better explain, it alludes to the notion that an explosion-induced cycle of space debris may accumulate so much trash in low Earth orbit that humanity would become stranded on Earth. So basically, too many satellites in space hit each other and then it leads to a big boom. A big boom leads to no more space travel. It may also imply that satellites couldn't be used since they would be destroyed in crashes. The idea is supported by the fact that in addition to all the additional artificial objects we're throwing into space, there are currently millions of micrometeoroids circling the Earth. And although some would argue that there is still a long way to go until that occurs, we regret to say that you are mistaken. Although it hasn't ruined the sky yet, professional astronomy has a lot of potential for error. A new tragedy of commons is just getting started. Before this, there was never a problem with someone launching thousands of satellites, and there is currently no method to prevent abuse of our beautiful sky. So, for those who believe it hasn't begun yet, meet astronomer Cliff Johnson of Northwestern University. Johnson was examining the Magellanic Clouds, two very weak dwarf galaxies which orbit our own Milky Way galaxy, with telescopes at Chile's Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory in the pre-dawn hours of November 8, 2019. These galaxies are educating scientists about star formation and what occurs when two galaxies collide. Johnson was viewing them from far via a webcam at Fermilab just outside of Chicago. Suddenly, he becomes confused and says, "We just started seeing these streaks come across the webcam view. I've never seen anything like that. And this came from Earth, not the heavens." And in the span of just 5 minutes, repeat just 5 minutes, a chain of roughly 19 satellites passed over the field of sight of his telescope, scarring the observation with brilliant parallel markings and reducing its scientific usefulness. And guess what? It didn't take him or his colleagues long to figure out who those satellites belonged to. And what makes the story even funnier is that only a week before, the one and only Starlink deployed 60 tiny satellites into low Earth orbit. What makes this story even more remarkable and notable is that it is not uncommon to observe the occasional satellite come into view, one at a time. It is not as if they disrupt the observation in any way. However, it is really inconvenient, and it takes some digital work to eliminate them from the final image. But to see 19? Damn, that was unprecedented, and it resulted in around 15 to 20% of the image being completely gone. Furthermore, Johnson fears that the cluster was an omen of a future in which nearly every telescope observation at twilight is ruined by satellite streaks. And guess what Johnson was correct about? SpaceX alone has a clearance to launch 12,000 satellites with hopes of eventually launching 42,000. Crazy. Last year saw a record number of items launched into space, with 1,807 departing the planet in 2021, a 41.84% increase over the previous year. To put this into context, 3,081 objects were launched into orbit between 20 and 21, and accounting for about 25% of all those objects ever launched. It took nearly 25 years since the first launch in '57 to attain the number of launches in the previous 2 years. So far, there have been 12,293 items blasted into space as of the end of January 2022. In addition, SpaceX has already launched over 2,500 Starlink satellites. At this pace, there's little chance of a future in which you look up and see nothing but the sky crawling. Astronomers, on the other hand, are in a very difficult predicament. This is not some far-off danger, it is already taking place. And what makes this news particularly frustrating is that SpaceX said in February this year that the majority of the satellites it deployed in that month for its Starlink high-speed internet network were doomed to fall from orbit due to a solar storm. According to the company's investigation, as many as 40 of the 49 satellites in the early days of its satellite, the problem was that it was far too bright, but they have now corrected that. However, we aren't being entirely fair because SpaceX isn't the only one attempting to destroy our orbit. OneWeb, Amazon, and other companies are some of the other significant players. Consider the possibility of up to 50,000 or more tiny satellites orbiting the planet in the future, and ask yourself if the 10-second speed is worth all of that to offer something that isn't really much better than what we presently have. Could corporations set up shining satellites to spell out the name of a well-known drink in the sky? Maybe, because it seems like there aren't any real regulations these billionaires have to follow. However, you might be wondering why the Kessler syndrome is being linked to Starlink satellites. Well, if the thought of launching over 30,000 satellites into orbit as part of the Starlink project isn't terrifying enough, even the European Space Agency is concerned about Starlink satellites interfering with its operations after they previously raised concerns about growing space trash. The space agency tweeted something along the lines of, "For the first time ever, ESA has undertaken a collision avoidance maneuver to save one of its satellites from colliding with a mega constellation, #space traffic, at some point in 2019. Really think of it. If we have that many satellites in orbit, there's a very real possibility that we may get stranded on Earth due to an excess of space debris. One space expert claims that Musk's proposal might build an unbreakable wall of space debris surrounding our planet. It is possible that the satellites would leave behind a catastrophic amount of space debris that would prevent rockets from taking off, a phenomenon known as Kessler syndrome. And last, why is China concerned? In essence, their concerns began to grow when Elon allegedly supplied free Starlink to Ukraine, while, in fact, the US had been covertly spending millions to send Starlink terminals to that country. But as you are aware, it's not the topic of this video. According to a report, Starlink is susceptible and might be crippled by electromagnetic or electronic warfare. The report added that Beijing has made substantial strides in related anti-satellite technology recently. The study encouraged the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, to get ready for the coordinated development of multiple anti-satellite weapons and quickly decrease its dependency on conventional GPS in order to avoid defeat in crucial future battles while facing Starlink. Do you really believe it's a good idea to launch so many satellites into orbit? After hearing the argument we've just made? If so, kindly share your reasoning in the comment area down below.